Hello, welcome to the A Book a Day channel. Today I'm going to interpret a book for you called Why Do I Do That? Psychological Defense Mechanisms and the Hidden Ways They Shape Our Lives. The cover of this book is quite interesting. It features a sheep wrapped in the spiky shell of a hedgehog. The sheep represents our inner selves, while the hedgehog shell symbolizes the psychological defense mechanisms that each of us possesses. The simplest definition of psychological defense mechanisms comes from the British psychoanalyst Donald Meltzer. He said that these mechanisms are essentially the lies we tell ourselves to avoid pain. When faced with pain or facts we don't want to acknowledge, everyone instinctively seeks to escape. This is when psychological defense mechanisms come into play. They push those difficult thoughts and feelings into the unconscious, keeping them out of our awareness. In this process, these mechanisms subtly distort our perception of reality and our own emotions. These mechanisms are necessary because facing reality can be too painful, and they help us get through difficult times. Whether it's the pain of parting with a loved one or the hidden jealousy we have for someone, there are corresponding defense mechanisms to shield us from these hard-to-accept emotions. We all need some level of psychological defense to lead normal lives. For example, the fact that we will all eventually die is something we need to push out of our consciousness using psychological defense mechanisms so that we can continue living a normal life, challenge ourselves, and engage in extreme sports without constantly dwelling on our mortality. Defense is necessary and useful for everyone. However, if these defense mechanisms become too deeply ingrained, they can hinder our ability to understand our true feelings. After all, sometimes we need to face pain. Avoiding facts may make us feel better in the moment, but in the long run, it can lead to worse outcomes. For example, numbing may help some people shield themselves from past traumatic experiences, but it also prevents them from understanding the impact of those experiences on themselves and achieving true healing. Self-deception may help some people maintain relationships and avoid the pain of betrayal, but it also makes it difficult for them to see the truth and escape from toxic relationships. Defense mechanisms only focus on the here and now, without considering the long-term cost. They are like a reflex, focused on avoiding immediate pain, without considering the long-term consequences. Avoiding pain is perfectly fine, as we all do it. But if you want personal growth, sometimes you need to confront your emotions and needs, identify your defense mechanisms, and learn how to let go of them in order to lead a more self-aware and authentic life. This book is a guide to help us recognize and let go of our defense mechanisms. The author of this book is the renowned American psychoanalyst Joseph Burgo, who is a clinical psychotherapist and a director of the International Psychoanalytic Association, with over 30 years of therapy experience. I will interpret this book for you in two parts. In the first part, we will discuss common defense mechanisms, and in the second part, we will talk about how to release harmful defense mechanisms and effectively cope with painful emotions. Now, let's get started. Let's first take a look at some psychological defense mechanisms. Firstly, there are 4 psychological defenses that are quite familiar to most of us. Let's briefly discuss them. They are repression, denial, displacement, and rationalization. Among these, repression is probably the most well-known. It is one of the earliest psychological defense mechanisms discovered by Freud. He found that there's a psychological force that prevents a person from becoming aware of certain unacceptable impulses or thoughts, and pushes these thoughts out of consciousness. This psychological force is repression. Repression is directed towards a range of feelings, such as anger, guilt, sadness, or realities one doesn't want to acknowledge. In literature and film, repression is often a recurring theme. Protagonists may repress intense emotions, youthful rebellion, hostility towards someone, or the impulse to escape reality. These stories often reach a climax when repression fails, and the repressed feelings break through the unconscious. Freud once pointed out that repression doesn't occur just once but is an ongoing process that requires a continuous expenditure of psychological energy to prevent what is repressed from returning to consciousness. The content that is repressed is often indestructible. Many people who repress hostility express it indirectly and covertly, often without realizing it. For example, the author had a visitor named Olivia, who appeared to be very friendly and caring but was constantly plagued by anxiety. Olivia's husband mentioned that she was always clumsy and broke things. The author noticed this detail. During the subsequent therapy sessions, the author discovered that Olivia was repressing unconscious anger related to her childhood environment. Her father was a typical authoritarian parent who didn't allow family members to express anger. Growing up, Olivia had repressed her awareness of anger. Breaking things was her unconscious expression of anger. Such indirect expressions of hostility are called passive-aggressive behavior. People don't directly express their anger or engage in aggressive behavior but find other ways to express it, such as procrastination, complaining, refusing to cooperate, or simply forgetting about the matter. Anger is an unwelcome emotion, so many people repress their awareness of their own inner anger. They may not even be aware of the anger deep within themselves, but it finds other ways to be expressed. Another defense mechanism similar to repression is denial. Denial is relatively easy to understand. Few people can be completely aware and honest with themselves. We occasionally deny certain feelings, such as saying, "Even though you forgot my birthday again, I'm not upset, or I'm not jealous of him." What's there to be jealous of? When a feeling contradicts our hopes or social norms, we tend to deny its authenticity. The third common psychological defense mechanism is displacement in daily life. This defense mechanism is particularly common. Taking out your frustration on someone else is a classic example of displacement. For instance, at work, if your boss scolds you and you're left feeling angry, but you can't vent your anger at your boss, you may come home and direct your anger towards your family members. This is displacement, shifting your angry emotions from one person to another. However, displacement is not particularly powerful. If the other person says, "Don't take it out on me," you might become aware of what you're doing and apologize. Another common scenario for displacement often occurs with new parents. When a new mom has to wake up in the middle of the night to care for the baby because of their crying, she might feel resentful if she sees her husband soundly asleep. Even if both partners share the responsibility for taking care of the baby, they may both feel that their own share of the duty is more burdensome. Child rearing is a heavy responsibility, and the child is the one causing parents to lose sleep. But new parents often complain not about the child but about each other. This is a form of emotional displacement. If someone triggers a certain emotion in us, and we can't direct that emotion towards them, we'll shift it onto someone else. Since partners are usually better equipped to handle the emotion of anger than infants in normal circumstances, new parents often direct their anger towards each other rather than the child. The fourth common psychological defense mechanism is rationalization. Sometimes we justify our emotions, motives, or behavior to make them appear reasonable. In other words, we find excuses for ourselves. It's okay to watch pirated movies because I'm a broke student, and the movie companies are rich. My low score on the paper is because the teacher doesn't like me, not because my writing is inadequate, even though I'm on a diet. I had a tough day at work, so having some ice cream is deserved. When our long-term goals conflict with our immediate desires, we unconsciously rationalize our actions to alleviate inner conflicts, so we can obtain what we want. When we can't have what we want, rationalization can also come into play. For example, sour grapes is a form of rationalization. So far, we have explored four common and familiar psychological defense mechanisms: repression, denial, displacement, and rationalization. Next, I want to focus on some less understood and more hidden defense mechanisms. The first type of defense mechanism we'll focus on is called splitting. In simple terms, the purpose of splitting as a defense mechanism is to simplify ambiguity and eliminate uncertainty. Humans dislike uncertainty. When we face situations with conflicting elements, we often become conflicted ourselves, which is a very unpleasant experience. Sometimes, to escape this inner turmoil, we make hasty decisions just to end the feeling of conflict. Contradictions or confusion are often intolerable for many people, so they escape into some form of certainty. Strict moral codes, rigid belief systems, dogma, and narrow-minded thinking can all shield us from the pain of uncertainty. As F. Scott Fitzgerald once said, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function." Unfortunately, most people can't do this. We tend to reject one of the opposing ideas and escape into the other. In the realm of politics, this phenomenon is particularly common. Many people hold absolute, oversimplified, and unchangeable beliefs about how to address complex social issues, choosing a black and white way of thinking, simplifying complex matters into an either-or state, taking a self-righteous stance, and having unwavering belief in one's correctness while believing the other is wrong is the defense mechanism of splitting. By eliminating complexity, we convince ourselves that we completely understand a particular issue and find psychological comfort. However, splitting as a defense mechanism affects our perception of others and reality. For instance, some overly zealous environmentalists may view animal rights and environmental protection as an either-or issue, with those opposing them being portrayed as heartless business magnates or cruel scientists. They appear as antagonists in a cartoon rather than as specific individuals. It's like when a child watches a cartoon and always asks who the good guys and bad guys are. Splitting makes us see the world as a black and white place. We now say there are many binary thinkers online, referring to those who can't dialectically analyze issues. This is a result of the excessive use of splitting. However, as mentioned earlier, defense mechanisms occur in the unconscious, and we often remain unaware of whether we've simplified complex reality with splitting. In the book, the author provides some exercises to help you recognize if you've used the splitting defense mechanism in your own life. For example, you can reflect on past periods of high stress in your life and ask yourself if you became more sensitive or irritable during those times. Have you ever felt persecuted because of the actions of friends or family members? Do you feel like you have enemies? Looking back, do you feel that your worldview or understanding of others was inaccurate? Do you now find those things seem trivial? If most of your answers are affirmative, then you may have used the splitting defense mechanism in the past to escape the discomfort of contradictions. Having discussed splitting, let's now focus on the second type of defense mechanism, which is idealization. Idealization involves elevating ordinary things or people to a perfect status, often involving unrealistic expectations and eventual disillusionment. In daily life, there are many things and people we idealize, with one of the most typical examples being idealizing romantic love. At the beginning of every romantic relationship, the loved one appears to be perfect, but as time passes, the idealized or gradually fades. If the sense of disillusionment becomes too strong, the relationship may come to an end. However, why is idealization considered a defense mechanism, and what does it defend against? What painful experiences are we avoiding? Just as splitting simplifies ambiguous issues, idealization offers a simple solution to certain predicaments. Do you know someone who constantly falls in and out of love, experiencing the cycle of excitement, infatuation, distress, and disillusionment repeatedly, leading to depression when the relationship ends? You might think that their depression is due to the breakup, but in reality, they may have been depressed all along. Romantic love acts as an antidepressant for them, and they crave the pleasure that falling in love brings, using it to escape the dullness of life. When this defense mechanism fails, they are forced to confront the emotions they initially sought to avoid. In human culture, the image of perfect love is a classic one. It's the fairy tale of the princess who marries the prince and lives happily ever after, where perfect love seems to be the answer to all problems. This in itself is a form of idealization. Pursuing love is fine, but the problem is that real love involves a more complex understanding of the other person, including tolerance of their flaws, which idealized love cannot accommodate. Only when we wake up from the fantasy of perfect love, discover that the other person is actually pretty good, and genuinely appreciate our partner, can we have a lasting relationship. If the idealization defense is too strong and an individual cannot accept the reality that their partner has flaws, it often leads to a disillusioned outcome. Apart from love, we also tend to idealize celebrities. We view certain public figures through idealized lenses, elevating them to perfect status, and they seem to have perfect lives free from troubles like ours. Idealizing celebrities helps us escape from something, the ordinariness of regular people. We believe that some people are fortunate enough to lead carefree lives without difficulties and worries. By focusing on and supporting them, we can briefly partake in their glamorous lives and escape from our own mundane world. This, to some extent, explains the phenomenon of idol worship. Additionally, on an unconscious level, we not only admire but may also envy the lives of celebrities. So many people take pleasure in the failures of celebrities. We can also idealize experiences. Some people believe that as long as a certain thing happens, they will finally achieve the happiness they've longed for. This may be a form of idealization. As long as I pass the graduate entrance exam, as long as I become a civil servant, as long as I find my ideal partner, my future life will be perfect. But in reality, the probability is not that high. In the book, the author shares his experience. When the author was a child, his family rarely reunited, and when they did, the atmosphere was often not very pleasant. As the author grew up, started a family, and had children of his own, he always had some idealized expectations when the whole family went on vacation, as if a perfect family vacation could make up for the regrets of his childhood. However, in reality, the vacations of the new small family are not perfect either, and can involve arguments and disappointments. Many people hold similar idealized beliefs about holidays, especially in today's trend of quitting one's job and traveling, as if one trip can solve all their troubles. Just by changing cities or jobs, everything will be perfect. But in reality, we will eventually return to an ordinary, imperfect life. Just like idealized love, idealizing experiences also acts as an antidepressant. The excitement and infatuation with what's about to happen can help us escape from other painful and boring feelings. If you often go through a cycle of infatuation and disappointment with others, if you have a short-lived interest in many things, if you find yourself full of energy one day and inexplicably plummet into emotional lows a few days later, If you often think, if things were like this, everything would be better, then you may be using the defense mechanism of idealization. Now that we've discussed idealization, let's move on to another psychological defense mechanism: control. Control is used to eliminate the feeling of helplessness. Every one of us has a desire for control. We long to have some degree of control over ourselves, others, and what happens to us. However, the reality is that life is unpredictable. But most people find it difficult to acknowledge this fact because it brings a strong sense of helplessness. So, following conventions and certain traditions can be comforting. But some people may overuse the psychological defense of control and take it to the extreme. For example, some people with severe cleanliness obsessions try to alleviate their anxiety by strictly controlling their surroundings. Others may vent their emotions through binge eating and vomiting, which is also a form of strict control. Self-harming behavior is another manifestation of the pursuit of control, as those who self-harm believe, if I cut myself now, I can decide when the pain happens, how long it lasts. In relationships between people, the desire for control is even more common. One of the reasons people get married is the hope that life can have some basic predictability when faced with emotions like jealousy and the fear of being abandoned. The desire to rely on another person is normal, but if it turns into an extreme craving for absolute certainty, it can lead to controlling or possessive behaviors. Jealous partners often demand their significant others to fully report their activities, and those with strong control desires may try to micromanage every detail of their employees' work. Besides these over-control behaviors, there are more subtle and less easily recognizable forms of control. Some people may appear to be powerless, clay, or even somewhat inept, but they may unconsciously have fantasies about controlling others. Because one person's helplessness can force their partner to take on the caretaker's role, they manipulate their partner to give them the financial and emotional support they desire, which is a hidden form of control. For instance, have you ever spent money extravagantly, ignored your bank account balance, and ended up having to ask your parents for help? Or have you ever promised your partner to do some household chores, but accidentally forgotten to do them? In reality, you may have wished for someone else to take over and do it for you unconsciously. Control can also manifest as an attempt to manage how others perceive us. Everyone manages to some extent how others perceive them, putting their best foot forward. However, if someone's desire for control turns into an urgent need to maintain the best image, to ensure that others admire and envy them, they may end up exaggerating or distorting facts, or investing too much energy into packaging their social media profiles. In addition to self-promotion, self-deprecation is also a form of control. Some people may say self-deprecating things, so you're forced to say, "Don't say that, you're obviously excellent." You might be a bit puzzled in your mind. Is this person deliberately criticizing themselves to make me refute them? But in reality, the other person may not be doing it on purpose. They're also doing it unconsciously, because they crave praise, to the extent that they can't wait for you to praise them spontaneously. They preemptively downgrade themselves so others can't lower their self-esteem even more. In the above, we briefly discussed 4 types of psychological defense mechanisms that we are more familiar with: repression, denial, displacement, and rationalization. Furthermore, we emphasize the 3 types of psychological defenses that many people might not be very familiar with: splitting, idealization, and control. At the same time, we also learned how to recognize whether we unconsciously use these defense mechanisms. As mentioned, psychological defense mechanisms are useful and necessary. They can help us shield ourselves from intolerable emotions and maintain normalcy. However, when these defenses are overused, they hinder our self-awareness and personal growth. We all need the protection of psychological defenses, but we cannot be dominated by them. So what should we do? How can we remove unhelpful psychological defenses? The starting point for dismantling psychological defenses is to focus on oneself and continue doing so as much as possible. When we are about to face negative emotions, like anger or pain, our initial reaction is to defend ourselves in familiar ways. Only by staying vigilant, continuously focusing on ourselves, and observing how our common defenses operate, can we choose to use these defenses as little as possible. To become aware of our true feelings and inner thoughts and emotions that we have buried in our unconscious, you can try eliminating distractions. After a day's work, we all seek entertainment through activities, like scrolling through our phones or watching shows. To some extent, these activities themselves are a form of psychological defense that distracts us from thoughts we'd rather not contemplate. One way to eliminate distractions is through mindfulness meditation, which has become quite popular in recent years. Mindfulness meditation can pull us out of our constant stream of thoughts and allow us to observe what we think and feel. We need to start by quieting our minds and removing distractions from our daily lives so that we may notice our true feelings. This doesn't mean that we need to become more enlightened or that we won't have troubles anymore. It means we can better cope with these emotions when they arise in healthier ways and no longer deceive ourselves. In the author's words, you should try to focus on and accept your true self instead of trying to force yourself to feel the way you should. Once you recognize the defense mechanisms you've been using, the next step is to make changes, to make choices different from the ones you made in the past and to face new situations. This way, you can challenge these habitual defenses. For example, for those who are particularly independent and self-reliant, saying "I need your help" to someone else might be a significant challenge. If you dislike conflict and suppress your opinions, you can try to express them the next time you have a differing viewpoint. In the book, the author provides an example of a visitor named Erica, a middle-aged woman who worked as an executive assistant to a vice president in a company for many years. During her work, she found it challenging to complete some of the more difficult tasks assigned by her superiors. She couldn't keep a clear head and would get lost in details. Through psychotherapy, Erica and the author explored the reasons behind her difficulty completing these tasks. The author discovered that Erica was reluctant to think independently and put in the effort required for her job. Her mindset became passive, and she frequently daydreamed. This passivity was a prominent characteristic of her overall personality. She was accustomed to relying on those around her and being taken care of. When she had to solve problems herself, she would feel helpless and angry. As mentioned earlier, sometimes helplessness can be a hidden form of control. Erica was trying to make others take care of her and complete tasks for her through her helplessness, so she wouldn't have to make an effort. Of course, this passivity came at a cost. With the passage of time and her growing age, her abilities did not improve, and opportunities disappeared. Erica realized the years she had wasted due to her negative passivity. If she could be more proactive instead of expecting others to think for her, she might have achieved greater success in her career. As we mentioned, once defenses become deeply ingrained, they can hinder a person's growth. Later, Erica decided to make a change. She pushed herself to do data-related work she had always avoided, and self-studied some software. She also enrolled in accounting courses. These efforts gradually made Erica a more capable and effective person. Conclusion. Well, that's the essence of the book I wanted to share with you. Today we've been honest with ourselves, recognizing the various psychological defense mechanisms each of them. For everyone, psychological defense mechanisms are necessary. They can help us temporarily shield ourselves from negative emotions and maintain normal lives. However, when these defense mechanisms become deeply ingrained, they can block our true feelings and needs, hindering self-reflection and personal development. To make changes, we need to focus on ourselves and remain vigilant and brave. We should hold firm expectations of ourselves and show self-compassion, finding a balance between these two. By accepting the inevitable painful and ugly emotions, we can cast doubt on our defenses. While these psychological defense mechanisms may not disappear entirely, they will no longer dominate us. So, what does a healthy use of psychological defenses look like? Healthy use of psychological defenses means protecting ourselves while being honest about our own state. You become better at identifying the true reasons behind your emotions. Even if you occasionally fail to self-reflect and take your frustration out on others, you quickly realize it and apologize. You still stand up for your beliefs occasionally, but you think more deeply. The world is no longer black and white, and you strive to balance different viewpoints and accept that there may not always be absolute answers. You understand that life's challenges do not have perfect, one-size-fits-all solutions. Perfect fairy tale endings only exist in stories and movies. You still enjoy your holiday travels, but returning to real life is no longer as disappointing as it once was. You know that someone else's way of planning a route may differ from yours. They might be wrong, but you won't always insist on doing things your way. Giving up control may still make you somewhat anxious, but you no longer eliminate your anxiety at all costs, or become uncontrollably angry when others get in your way. In social situations, you feel more comfortable, and you no longer strive to appear perfect. When someone endlessly brags, you can tell right away what they're doing. In intimate relationships, you are more tolerant of less than perfect relationships. You understand that you're just an ordinary person, like everyone else. Well, that's the essence of this book. If you enjoyed our video, feel free to share it with your friends. Congratulations, you've just finished another book.